She slapped a royal guard at Buckingham Palace. You won't believe what happened next. Olivia Grant, a 29-year-old influencer, had always lived her life in the spotlight. Her world revolved around luxury, status, and the perfect image, all of which she effortlessly displayed on her social media accounts. That afternoon, she was in London, standing outside Buckingham Palace, ready to give her followers yet another spectacle. To her, the palace was just another backdrop for her next post, another way to show the world how far she had come, how much power and influence she had at her fingertips. She wasn't here to admire history or traditions, she was here to make a statement, as usual. Olivia had come to think of herself as above it all, untouchable, the center of every room she entered. When she saw the royal guard standing perfectly still, their crimson uniforms and towering bearskin hats looking like something out of a history book, she didn't see symbols of Britain's heritage. Instead, she saw a chance to get attention. The guards didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge anyone. That intrigued her more than anything else. It was a challenge, and Olivia Grant didn't shy away from challenges. She raised her phone, turned on her live stream, and smirked at the camera. "Okay, guys, check this out," she said, her voice sharp and filled with the confidence that had made her a social media star. "I'm here at Buckingham Palace, and let me tell you, these guys... total circus." Her voice cut through the murmur of the crowd, drawing eyes in all directions. Some people were intrigued, others confused, but most stood back, sensing that something was about to unfold, something that wasn't quite right. Olivia didn't care about the murmurs or the disapproving stares. She was in control, and the world was watching. "Let's see if these statues can actually move," she added with a sly grin, stepping closer to the nearest guard. She snapped her fingers in front of his face, hoping for some kind of reaction, a flinch, a blink, anything. But nothing. The guard remained perfectly still, his face unreadable, his posture flawless. And that infuriated Olivia. She wanted more. She needed more. The game had just begun. Olivia's frustration started to grow as she stood there, staring at the unmoving royal guard. He didn't flinch, didn't react, he was like a statue. And that, in her mind, was unacceptable. She wasn't used to being ignored, especially not in front of her thousands of followers. The crowd around her murmured, some of them unsure whether to be amused or uncomfortable, but Olivia wasn't concerned with them. She was the star of this show, and no one, least of all this stone-faced soldier, was going to take the spotlight away from her. "Come on, you're not even a little bit human, huh?" she said aloud, her voice cutting through the tension in the air. She moved even closer to the guard, her phone still recording, her smirk widening with every passing second. It was almost too easy, too perfect. The crowd was watching, the cameras were on, and this was exactly the kind of content that would get her more followers, more likes, more attention. But the guard remained completely still, his face unreadable, his eyes focused somewhere far beyond her. Olivia's impatience kicked in. She was used to getting what she wanted, and she had no patience for this silent act. Without a second thought, she pulled her hand back and slapped him across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the square, sharp and jarring. Olivia's eyes glinted with triumph as she turned back to her phone, smirking at the camera. "Did you see that?" "He didn't even flinch," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. The crowd went silent for a moment, stunned by her audacity. A few people looked around, unsure of how to react, while others quickly started recording the moment. Some took a step back, sensing that things were about to escalate, but Olivia was too caught up in herself to notice. She laughed, spun around to face the guard again, and said, "What's wrong, Mr. Important? Not going to do anything? You just gonna stand there like a robot? She took another step toward him, crowding his personal space, daring him to break his perfect composure. What happened next was something Olivia never saw coming. The guard, who had been completely still, made his first move. A sharp, controlled step forward that shattered the illusion of his immobility. The crowd gasped. And in that moment, Olivia realized, perhaps too late, that she had gone too far. As Olivia stood there, a self-satisfied smirk still on her face, the crowd began to stir. The tension was palpable now. People were no longer laughing or cheering her on. Instead, they were whispering, some even shifting uneasily on their feet. But Olivia, still oblivious to the shift in energy around her, couldn't have cared less. Her phone was in her hand, the live stream still going strong, and she was soaking up every second of the attention. "Did you see that?" she gloated, her voice dripping with arrogance as she spoke to her followers. "He didn't even blink. This guy's a joke." She turned to the guard again, her mind racing with the need to push further, to make him react in a way that would solidify her as the star of this ridiculous show. It wasn't enough that he hadn't flinched when she slapped him. She wanted more. She wanted a moment so big that it would be talked about for days, something that would go viral, something that would make her an even bigger star. But the moment she stepped forward again, something in the air shifted. The royal guard, who had remained completely still, his face emotionless, took a single step toward her. The movement was so sharp, so sudden, that Olivia didn't have time to react. Her heart skipped a beat. For the first time, she felt a slight pang of fear. The guard had moved, and in that moment, everything she thought she knew about control, about being the center of attention, started to unravel. Olivia took a step back, her breath catching in her throat. The crowd went silent, their eyes glued to the scene unfolding before them. This wasn't the prank she had planned. This wasn't a game. The royal guard had broken protocol, and the tension was so thick, you could almost hear it crackling in the air. The guard didn't say a word, but the change in his posture was undeniable. His jaw clenched slightly, his nostrils flared just enough to show he was no longer indifferent. The crowd, once passive, was now on edge. Cameras clicked, capturing the moment for eternity. Olivia's confidence wavered. She had pushed too far, and for the first time, she realized the guard wasn't just a symbol of tradition, he was a man, and he was not playing by her rules. Olivia's heart raced as she took a step back, her mind scrambling to regain control of the situation. The guard's single, purposeful step forward had shattered the calm she had been so sure of. The crowd, once amused, now stood frozen, the energy in the air electric with anticipation. Olivia could feel the weight of their eyes on her, but she refused to back down. She was still the center of attention, wasn't she? They were watching her, waiting for her next move. Her pride, however, couldn't let her admit even a sliver of doubt. "Come on, Mr. Robot," she taunted, trying to keep her voice steady, though it cracked slightly. "Do something. You're just an actor, right?" She moved even closer, her face practically touching his chest now. She had to keep this show going. There was no turning back. But something had changed in the way the guard stood. His posture, once statuesque, was now even more rigid. His breathing, slower and deeper, filled the silence. It wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It was something far more terrifying, control. As Olivia raised her hand again, ready to slap him once more, the guard's grip shot out like lightning. His hand closed around her wrist with a force she hadn't seen coming. The crowd gasped in unison, and for the first time, Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. She tugged at her wrist, but the guard's hold was unyielding. He didn't yank or twist, he simply held her firmly, and the power in that grip sent a message she couldn't ignore. "Let go of me," Olivia demanded, panic creeping into her voice. But the guard didn't respond. His eyes, cold and unflinching, stared down at her. He hadn't spoken a word until now. "You have assaulted a royal guard." His voice was low, controlled, as if he had been waiting for this moment his whole life. Olivia froze. The world around her seemed to stop. She had no words. No deflection. Nothing. She stood there, wrist locked in the guard's steady grip, staring into his ice-cold blue eyes. Her mind raced, but there was no escape. The consequences were real now. No amount of fame, no amount of followers could save her from what she had just done. The crowd, once a silent audience, was now buzzing with disbelief. Phones clicked, recording every second of her downfall. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as the reality set in. This time, there was no way out. Olivia stood there, her wrist still firmly held in the royal guard's grip, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely powerless. The crowd around her had fallen silent, their phones still trained on her every movement, every expression. The realization hit her like a freight train. She had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. Her usual bravado, the confidence that had made her the queen of social media, was gone. All she had left was the cold, unflinching stare of the guard and the judgment of the people around her. She tried to pull her wrist free, jerking it violently, but his grip didn't waver. Panic started to crawl up her throat, but she swallowed it down. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be the star, the center of attention, not the one standing there, humiliated and trapped. Her followers were watching. The comments were flooding in, and she could already hear the judgment in their voices, even if they hadn't typed it yet. This wasn't just a bad moment. This was the end of everything she had built. "You're under arrest for assaulting a royal guard," the guard said again, his voice even, emotionless. It felt like a final verdict. Olivia opened her mouth to protest, to tell him this was all a misunderstanding, that it was just a joke, but the words caught in her throat. There was no excuse, no way out. The realization that this wasn't a viral moment anymore, but a real consequence, crushed her. As the guard slowly released her wrist and two more guards appeared, stepping into the square with an air of absolute authority, Olivia's heart raced. She could feel her legs weaken beneath her. The eyes of the crowd were like a weight on her chest, their silent judgment suffocating her. She glanced around desperately, searching for a sign of sympathy, but all she saw were cameras, people with their phones raised, capturing every second of her fall from grace. The two new guards stepped forward, their movements precise, unwavering. Olivia's once sharp and arrogant demeanor was now reduced to panic. Her phone slipped from her hand, landing with a dull thud on the pavement. She tried to step back, but the guards were closing in on her. There was nowhere to run. The crowd, once her adoring audience, now felt like an inescapable cage. Her world had turned upside down, and she was powerless to stop it. Before she could take another step, a guard's hand shot out, gripping her arm and spinning her around. The cold reality of what was happening hit her hard. She was being arrested, in front of everyone, for something she had thought she could get away with. The whispers of the crowd grew louder as they watched her humiliation unfold. "Not a joke anymore, huh?" someone whispered in the crowd. Olivia's face flushed with shame as she was led away, her phone still buzzing with notifications she couldn't even bring herself to check. She had once been the center of attention, but now, in that moment, she was just another person being dragged away by the consequences of her actions. And the royal guards? They stood there, as motionless and unshaken as ever, a symbol of tradition that had just made Olivia realize the harsh truth: she was no longer in control. What do you think of Olivia's downfall? Was she asking for it, or did the royal guard go too far? Do you believe her actions should have consequences like this, or was it just a joke taken too seriously? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Did she deserve what happened, or is there a line that shouldn't be crossed when it comes to tradition and respect? Let's discuss. Backhand index pointing down.